Law of One, Book 1, Session 18, February 4th, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite Creator. We communicate now. Questioner. I was thinking last night that if I were in the place of Ra right now, the first distortion of the Law of One might cause me to mix some erroneous data with the true information that I was transmitting to this group. Do you do this? Ra, I am Ra. We do not intentionally do this. However, there will be confusion. It is not our intent in this particular project to create erroneous information, but to express in this confining ambience of your language system the feeling of the infinite mystery of the one creation in its infinite and intelligent unity. Questioner. Thank you. I have a question here that I will read. Much of the mystic tradition of seeking on earth holds the belief that the individual self must be erased or obliterated and the material world ignored for the individual to reach nirvana, as it is called, or enlightenment. What is the proper role of the individual self and its worldly activities to aid an individual to grow more into the Law of One? Ra, I am Ra. The proper role of the entity is in this density to experience all things desired, to then analyze, understand, and accept these experiences, distilling from them the love light within them. Nothing shall be overcome. That which is not needed falls away. The orientation develops due to analysis of desire. These desires become more and more distorted towards conscious application of love light as the entity furnishes itself with distilled experience. We have found it to be inappropriate in the extreme to encourage the overcoming of any desires, except to suggest the imagination rather than the carrying out in the physical plane, as you call it, of those desires not consonant with the Law of One, thus preserving the primal distortion of free will. The reason it is unwise to overcome is that overcoming is an imbalanced action, creating difficulties in balancing in the time-space continuum. Overcoming thus creates the further environment for holding on to that which apparently has been overcome. All things are acceptable in the proper time for each entity, and in experiencing, in understanding, in accepting, in then sharing with other-selves, the appropriate distortion shall be moving away from distortions of one kind to distortions of another, which may be more consonant with the Law of One. It is, shall we say, a shortcut to simply ignore or overcome any desire. It must instead be understood and accepted. This takes patience and experience which can be analyzed with care, with compassion for self and for other-self. Questioner. Basically, I would say that to infringe upon the free will of another entity would be the basic thing never to do under the Law of One. Can you state any other breaking of the Law of One than this basic rule? Ra, I am Ra. As one proceeds from the primal distortion of free will, one proceeds to the understanding of the focal points of intelligent energy, which have created the intelligences or the ways of a particular mind-body-spirit complex in its environment, both what you would call natural and what you would call man-made. Thus, the distortions to be avoided are those which do not take into consideration the distortions of the focus of energy of love light, or shall we say, the logos of this particular sphere or density. These include the lack of understanding of the needs of the natural environment, the needs of other-selves, mind, body, spirit complexes. These are many due to the various distortions of man-made complexes in which the intelligence and awareness of entities themselves have chosen a way of using the energies available. Thus, what would be an improper distortion with one entity is proper with another. We can suggest an attempt to become aware of the other self as self and thus do that action which is needed by other self, understanding from the other self's intelligence and awareness. In many cases, this does not involve the breaking of the distortion of free will into a distortion or fragmentation called infringement. However, it is a delicate matter to be of service, and compassion, sensitivity, and an ability to empathize are helpful in avoiding the distortions of man-made intelligence and awareness. The area or arena called the societal complex is an arena in which there are no particular needs for care, for it is the prerogative, honor, duty of those in the particular planetary sphere to act according to their free will for the attempted aid of the social complex. Thus, you have two simple directives: awareness of the intelligent energy expressed in nature, awareness of the intelligent energy expressed in self to be shared when it seems appropriate by the entity with the social complex, and you have one infinitely subtle and various set of distortions of which you may be aware. That is, distortions with respect to self and other selves, not concerning free will, but concerning harmonious relationships and service to others as other selves would most benefit. Questioner: as an entity in this density grows from childhood, he becomes more aware of his responsibilities. Is there an age below which an entity is not responsible for his actions, or is he responsible from the time of his birth? Ra. I am Ra. An entity incarnating upon the earth plane becomes conscious of self at a varying point in its time-space progress through the continuum. This may have a median, shall we say, of approximately 15 of your months. Some entities become conscious of self at a period closer to incarnation, some at a period farther from this event. In all cases, responsibility becomes retroactive from that point backward in the continuum, so that distortions are to be understood by the entity and dissolved as the entity learns. Questioner: then an entity 4 years old would be totally responsible for any actions that were against or inharmonious with the law of one. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. It may be noted that it has been arranged by your social complex structures that the newer entities to incarnation are to be provided with guides of a physical mind-body-spirit complex, thus being able to learn quickly what is consonant with the law of one. Questioner: who are these guides? Ra. I am Ra. These guides are what you call parents, teachers, and friends. Questioner: you stated yesterday that forgiveness is the eradicator of karma. I am assuming that balanced forgiveness for the full eradication of karma would require forgiveness not only of other selves, but also the forgiveness of self. Am I correct? Ra. I am Ra. You are correct. We will briefly expand upon this understanding in order to clarify. Forgiveness of other self is forgiveness of self. An understanding of this insists upon full forgiveness upon the conscious level of self and other self, for they are one. A full forgiveness is thus impossible without the inclusion of self. Questioner: Thank you. A most important point. You mentioned that there were a number of confederations. Do all serve the infinite creator in basically the same way, or do some specialize in some particular types of service? Ra. I am Ra. All serve the one creator. There is nothing else to serve, for the creator is all that there is. It is impossible not to serve the creator. There are simply various distortions of this service. As in the Confederation, which works with your peoples, each confederation is a group of specialized individual social memory complexes, each doing that which it expresses to bring into manifestation. Questioner: Can you tell me how Yahweh communicated to Earth's people? Ra. I am Ra. This is a somewhat complex question. The first communication was what you would call genetic. The second communication was the walking among your peoples to produce further genetic changes in consciousness. The third was a series of dialogues with chosen channels. Questioner: Can you tell me what these genetic changes were and how they were brought about? Ra. I am Ra. Some of these genetic changes were in a form similar to what you call the cloning process. Thus, entities incarnated in the image of the Yahweh entities. The second was a contact of the nature you know as sexual, changing the mind-body-spirit complex through the natural means of the patterns of reproduction devised by the intelligent energy of your physical complex. Questioner: Can you tell me specifically what they did in this case? Ra. I am Ra. We have answered this question. Please restate for further information. Questioner: Can you tell me the difference between the sexual programming prior to Yahweh's intervention and after intervention? Ra. I am Ra. This is a question which we can only answer by stating that intervention by genetic means is the same no matter what the source of this change. Questioner: Can you tell me Yahweh's purpose in making the genetic sexual changes? Ra. I am Ra. The purpose 75,000 years ago, as you measure time, was of one purpose only. That to express in the mind-body complex those characteristics which would lead to further and more speedy development of the spiritual complex. Questioner: How did these characteristics go about leading to the more spiritual development? Ra. I am Ra. The characteristics which were encouraged included sensitivity of all the physical senses to sharpen the experiences and the strengthening of the mind complex in order to promote the ability to analyze these experiences. Questioner: When did Yahweh act to perform the genetic changes? Ra. I am Ra. The Yahweh group worked with those of the planet you call Mars 75,000 years ago in what you would call the cloning process. There are differences, but they lie in the future of your time-space continuum, and we cannot break the free will law of confusion. The 2,600 approximately time was the second time. We correct ourselves. 3,600 approximately the time of attempts by those of the Orion group during this cultural complex. This was a series of encounters in which the ones called Anak were impregnated with the new genetic coding by your physical complex means so that the organisms would be larger and stronger. Questioner: why did they want larger and stronger organisms? Ra: I am Ra. The ones of Yahweh were attempting to create an understanding of the law of one by creating mind-body complexes capable of grasping the law of one. The experiment was a decided failure from the view of the desired distortions due to the fact that rather than assimilating the law of one, it was a great temptation to consider the so-called social complex or subcomplex elite or different and better than other-selves, this one of the techniques of service to self. Questioner: then the Orion group produced this larger body complex to create an elite so that the law of one could be applied in what we call the negative sense. Ra: I am Ra. This is incorrect. The entities of Yahweh were responsible for this procedure in isolated cases as experiments in combating the Orion group. However, the Orion group were able to use this distortion of mind-body complex to inculcate the thoughts of the elite rather than concentrations upon the learning teaching of oneness. Questioner: was Yahweh then of the Confederation? Ra: I am Ra. Yahweh was of the Confederation, but was mistaken in its attempts to aid. Questioner: then Yahweh's communications did not help or create what Yahweh wished for them to create. Is this correct? Ra: I am Ra. The results of this interaction were quite mixed. Where the entities were of a vibrational sum characteristic which embraced oneness, the manipulations of Yahweh were very useful. Wherein the entities of free will had chosen a less positively oriented configuration of some total vibratory complex, those of the Orion group were able for the first time to make serious inroads upon the consciousness of the planetary complex. Questioner: can you tell me specifically what allowed the most serious of these inroads to be made by the Orion group? Ra: I am Ra. This will be the final full question. Specifically, those who are strong, intelligent, etc., have a temptation to feel different from those who are less intelligent and less strong. This is a distorted perception of oneness with other-selves. It allowed the Orion group to form the concept of the holy war, as you may call it. This is a seriously distorted perception. There were many of these wars of a destructive nature. Questioner: thank you very much. As you probably know, I will be working for the next 3 days, so we will probably have another session tonight if you think it is possible. The next session after that would not be until 4 days from now. Do you believe another session tonight is possible? Ra: I am Ra. This instrument is somewhat weak. This is a distortion caused by lack of vital energy. Thus, nurturing the instrument and physical balancing will allow another session. Do you understand? Questioner: not completely. What specifically shall we do for physical balancing? Ra: I am Ra. 1. Take care with the foodstuffs. 2. Manipulate the physical complex to alleviate the distortion toward pain. 3. Encourage a certain amount of what you would call your exercise. The final injunction: to take special care with the alignments this second session so that the entity may gain as much aid as possible from the various symbols. We suggest you check these symbols most carefully. This entity is slightly misplaced from the proper configuration. Not important at this time. More important when a second session is to be scheduled. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator. Adonai.